Hey, what's happening? Before we jump into the show, I wanted to see if you had any music on a hard drive. You have a band, you have a project, and you want to self-release your own music. Well, there's an easy way to do it. You can go to distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate and go get your music up on all the streamers. You keep 100% of your royalties, and you can get 30% off by using this code. It's a great, easy way to get your music up on the streamers and share it with your fans, your friends, your family, your mom, your dog, everybody. Everyone wants to hear it. But go to distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate, HYPHENATE, and send me the link. I want to hear it too. Send your mom the link. Send your dog the link. They all want to hear it too. We'd like to thank our sponsor, iZotope, the absolute leaders in intuitively designed plugins for audio restoration, mixing, and mastering. At iZotope.com, you'll find a plethora of tools and suites that will enhance your audio production, whether it's voice, video, podcast, or a full production recording session. Check out the industry-standard audio repair tool, RX11, or the multi-tool mixer plugin, Neutron 5, or the powerful Ozone 11 mastering suite, plus tons more. Go to iZotope.com and use the code FRET10 at checkout for 10% off. That's FRET10 to get 10% off at checkout. And again, the website is iZotope.com, IZOTOPE.com.
Film is a multi-headed monster. It's much different than painting, where you're alone and crying in the corner most of the time.
What's happening? Thank you so much for tuning in to Hyphenate with me, your host, Randy Randall. This is our show for Thursday, October 16th. Today's guest is Brian DeRan, artist, filmmaker, former music management, music industry insider, turned Southwest art person. He has a new film coming out that he has a Kickstarter going for about the legendary music venue Lounge Acts, the Chicago underground, birthplace of focal point of so many things, rock and roll in Chicago. And he has a film titled, what is it titled here? The Last Night at Lounge Acts. I think it's actually the last 3 nights at Lounge Acts. We'll get into it. We'll talk about it. But he documented the very last days of the legendary Lounge Acts Club. And he's running a Kickstarter to raise some funds to put the whole thing together. You can see the trailer and sign up for the Kickstarter over on his website, livingmountain.com. That's Living Mountain without any of the consonants. So let's go LVNGMNTN.com. So Living Mountain is the website for all things Lounge Acts and Brian DeRan. You can also find the Lounge Acts Doc on Instagram. That's LOUNGEAXDOC, Lounge Acts Doc on Instagram. And then you can also find Living Mountain on the Instagram as well, LVNGMNTN on the Instagrams for all things documentary and Brian and his art and Southwest. And we have a great talk. And he talks about his adventures in the music biz and being a manager and touring and shooting photos and shooting film of the underground alternative music that has taken place in the last 25, 30 years. So go support him. Go check out the trailer. Go donate some money. It's a good cause. It's a great project. If you are into shellac or Wilco or anything in the Chicago music underground that's come bubbling up into the mainstream world, in the last 30 years, this would be a project that's of interest to you, I would say. I count myself as one of those Chicagoites, Chicago, like an acolyte, like a fan. What do you call yourself if you're a fan of Chicago, but not from Chicago? Chicagoan if you're from there, but if you're a fan of Chicago. Yeah, it was a great talk. And I'm excited to bring these filmmakers who are working on independent projects onto the podcast to talk about the projects they're working on, kind of get a sense of the work in progress as they're doing it, and present the opportunity for people to support them and get involved and find out more about that creative process and take part of it. Be a supporter of creating new media. Independent media matters, and we make it together. Right? You do it as a community. We come together. If you have a project that you're working on or you want to get involved in this community of creative artists, reach out to me. You can find me hyphenatehalftime@gmail.com. You can also find me on the Instagrams at Randy S. Randall on the Instagram. Yeah, it's funny. I just posted a video from last week's guest, Erica Dawn Lyle. And it was a clip from the show, and I just before hitting record here, I just saw somebody wrote a little note. They were nice enough to take time out of their day to comment on the video to please don't make David Lee Roth trans, because Erica in that episode and in the clip I posted talks about how there could be, an interpretation of the song, the Van Halen song "On Fire," and she was looking to explore the themes in that song and frame the lyrics around a trans experience. And of course, leave it to social media to be social media. The internet will always be the internet. So I just responded politely, like, are you kidding me? David Lee Roth could be a trans ally. Why not? And then I found some helpful little GIFs, the little quick animation things you can find there of David Lee Roth at his sassiest. It's just absurd. I mean, especially of all the things going on in the world, really, the trans experience is so marginalized and so at risk and so just bombarded with attention and with vitriol and just cultural misunderstanding and hate that it really got to go out of your way to punch down in this small part of our larger creative community. So please go out, support Erica Dawn Lyle. Her new record "On Fire" is out now, and she's also on tour still. So support Brian DeRan, check out our interview, but also don't forget about Erica Dawn Lyle and all of your trans friends, and especially trans kids. It's just, this is our time as a creative community. We really got to band together. I love seeing what's going on in Portland. People in the big blow up costumes, the inflatable frog costumes, just really, such a creative use of dissent and peaceful protest and just calling out the absurdity and where, the right and the conservative wants this ploy into violence and confrontation and ripping communities apart and just really hoping to bait the left into this violent outbreak that they could then call martial law and then just take away, all civil liberties and just, really just go far beyond where they've already been. You can just see the foundations being created now and here so blatantly, and to find the creative, progressive left, just, not taking the bait and pushing back in such a creative way and just calling it out for what it is. This is really, I think, something that we have to be sophisticated about and thoughtful and honest, and just really not play the game and not get baited into violence and not get, not just play into their playbook. You know what I mean? They're trying to outrage and just take over the cultural narrative, the news narrative, all of it. And, just everything we can do to resist and reaffirm our cultural narrative of really, empathy, just at the simplest form of it. I'm trying to think of so many things to say, but just really just having empathy and golden rule and just really treating others as you'd want to be treated, and just seeing people as human beings and calling out this racism and this fascist authority. And it's not hard. It's not hard to do. We see it, but just I applaud everybody out there for just fighting the good fight and being smart and creative and bringing your communities together. And I hope we can be part of that here on our Hyphenate podcast journey. So thanks for supporting. Thanks for being here. Go support Erica Dawn Lyle and her record and her tour that she's doing now. And also check out Brian DeRan's Kickstarter. Lounge Acts Doc is what it's all about. And you'll hear him break it all down and how we got to it. All right. Be well. You're out in New Mexico. How was that finding?
Yes. It's interesting. It's it's a beautiful place. I was visiting here on and off for the past 5 years, and then finally decided to make the move here. And it's a very small town full of a lot of older people. There's not a lot of nightlife, as you would say. So it's getting used to it.
Are you out towards Albuquerque or further out than that?
No, I'm actually I'm in a little place called Tesuque, which is just above Santa Fe, about 5 miles.
Okay.
Coming from living in Joshua Tree for 7 years, that's like a stone's throw to me. So it's kind of awesome to sort of be back in civilization.
Got it. That's awesome. Cool, man. Well, yeah, I know I want to talk about Lounge Acts and the feature length documentary we're working on, but I wanted to kind of set the scene a little bit. Like, tell me, how did you first get started in music? Where'd you grow up, and how did you find your way in and around live music and bands and all stuff creative?
It's pretty boring story, but pretty weird, I guess. I had been in the film industry, and I had just got out of college. I'd gone to school at MICA in Baltimore for painting, and started delivering art for international, yeah, but domestically for me, for museums to collectors and that sort of stuff on the East Coast. And then also doing films when they were coming in. And Baltimore really only had like two major personalities that were making films there. Of course, John Waters, and then Barry Levinson was doing stuff. And then I moved to New York thinking I was going to get more involved in the film industry, and was living with a girlfriend in Carroll Gardens at the time, which was at that point really not by any means an exciting neighborhood. It was very much old school Italian, great delis and that sort of stuff. But I was renting a room at a friend's place in Manhattan, which was right down the Lower East Side. And so as my 25-year-old brain worked back then, it was much more exciting to be in Manhattan than it was in Carroll Gardens. And the relationship ended up not working out, of course. But at the time, a good friend of mine, Sean Meadows, had just joined a band called Juno 44. And he was living in New York, and they had been recording and doing some stuff. And I called him and told him that I had just split with the girlfriend. And he's like, can you drive? And I was like, yeah, of course. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, we need a driver for this US tour. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, if you want to just, jump in the van with us and take off, that'd be awesome. And I was like, okay, fine. And so I went on tour with Juno 44 for what I thought was going to be 3 weeks, but it ended up being like 6 months or something. And then, that was on and off. Like, it wasn't a 6-month tour. Yeah. But, went to Australia, Taiwan, went all over the place with these guys. And then because of my personality, I just couldn't sit around and only drive. So I started taking up the responsibilities of settling at night and calling and advancing, and I became a tour manager. And then started tour managing other musicians after that, in between film jobs. But then the film jobs really dried up.
And what sort of jobs were you doing on the films? Like, where you were working on set deck and
I was doing I was doing mostly set deck stuff, like on the John Waters films, Pecker, Cecil B. Demented. I was doing scenic painting, which is essentially, making the painting it if it were like the character lived there. Like, we had one big the characters in Cecil B. Demented were, art students, like fractured art students who lived together in this giant warehouse, which is actually a really beautiful old theater in downtown Baltimore. But we had to make it look cracked out and I must have painted so many cock and balls in 2 days with spray paint that I was like, I never want to see another one of these things again. But of course,
and then you went on tour in every green
rooms. Yeah. Exactly. I was like, oh God,
if you can't draw a crowd, draw a dick.
Exactly. So then at The Wire, when The Wire came into town, I had done props on the first episode, the pilot. And then once that got picked up, they basically brought in LA crew. And then I was like, well, this is not cool. And I had another tour headed up. So I just started doing that. And at the time I also had met my partner in Monitor Records, Jason Foster, on a film. He had been in the film program at Towson University. So he was my intern, surprisingly, on a really independent film at that point in like 98 or something. And we got along really well. He loved music. I turned him on to a bunch of stuff, like sub pop things and like really sort of more underground at that point things. And he just, really loved it. And then we decided to start a record label. We started Monitor Records and we put out Ox's, Jeff Mueller's first record, Jason Noble's solo record. And then we picked up Cass McCombs and did a bunch of things. And then I split from that point and became an owner of the Auto Bar and started just managing specifically. The record label at that point was driving me bananas. It was not making money. It was such a nightmare. This was also, pre MP3s. So it was like literally getting press photos printed, sent back, put in a manila envelope with
black and white. Yeah.
And then like stapled press kits and you put it in there and you mailed it. And so it was a lot of work and it was fun. I like didn't hate it by any means, but I just saw that it really wasn't fulfilling. I was tour managing was great, but managing was kind of revealing itself to be a direction I wanted to go to. And so at that point I met the Animal Collective guys at the Auto Bar because they would come in. I would schedule myself for the shows that I wanted to see, which happened to be the same shows they wanted to see. So we got to know each other. And they started to like, Sung Tongs had come out and it had really kind of put a spotlight on them. And because I had a label and I had tour manager and I knew all these things, we just started a conversation about like, well, what do we do next? And like, what about this? And like, should this person be asking for this and that sort of stuff? And I was in, tour manager label mode. So I was like, I'm going to manage you. And we ended up trying 6 months and it ended up being like 7 years working with them, which was great. And I love those guys to death.
And that's a wild time for the Animal Collective story too. I mean, from Sung Tongs on, those next 7 years were probably one of the bigger meteoric rises from the underground into, mainstream success. And, that's been seen in the indie world at that time.
Yeah. And it couldn't have happened to a better bunch of guys. Like they handled it really well. None of them became stars in their eyes and there was no like white orchids in the green room. None of that stuff happened. They were just like, kind of just like, what is going on? They were mostly like shocked the whole time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's full of integrity and artistic vision and, really made quality records, in that run. It was huge. And obviously having someone like you on their side and their corner probably helped take a lot of the heavy business lifting off of it so that they could.
Yeah. It was a
world.
Totally. It was a very interesting time for both of us because I had not been in a management role and at that level before. I was sort of operating in. I'd made contacts at certain labels. And at that time as well, like I mentioned before, pre-internet, as a tour manager, you would go, I feel like I had to go to Chicago. I went and I would go to the Touch and Go offices and I would meet everyone there, radio, publicist, Corey, like the whole team. Mm-hmm. Then they would send the journalists to the club to do the interviews. And so you would send up 3 hours, like you have 5 interviews, you have this radio station to do. So it was, the Rolodex that I got was hand built, so to speak. So I had a lot of contacts that I had built over the past 3 or 4 years as a tour manager that really helped me get an understanding of how things worked as it moved into the digital era where blogs started to happen rather than weekly newspapers and that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it was a transitional period for basically everyone involved. And Domino had just come off the Arctic Monkeys success, I believe. So they were really sort of hitting a stride. And Lawrence Bell, who is the main owner of Domino, is like one of the sweetest, loveliest people in the world and really understood those dudes. So it was just like perfect timing in a lot of aspects.
Yeah. Yeah. Then moving from, and then Fat Cat and all the other.
Yeah. Who were also amazing. Yeah. Amazing people.
Yeah. A lot of overlap. I feel like between our no age journey and some of those other journeys, booking folks and some of the stuff. So, as a person, I mean, this, this is a role that you never trained for, right? There was no school, like how to become a music manager or how to do any of this kind of thing. Like, was there, obviously now, you've gone on to do so many other things past that, but was there a creative aspect to it, or how did you feel, in terms of what were you getting out of it, I guess, as a manager, as a tour manager, and being with friends? Obviously there's the social aspect of it all and there's a financial aspect to it, but I mean, was there, just bringing these visions to life, or this creative sort of side of things, like, kind of coming from art handling and movie film production world, it's like you're on the outside, but here you are sort of like more in the eye of the storm.
Yeah. Well, first, I would never trust anyone who went to college for music management. That would be the worst decision that they could make. And also, they're financially thinking. They're thinking about safety, probably how things. They're looking at history and experience of how campaigns have rolled out that have worked in the past. They're basing everything off references and
past success versus new innovation.
Yeah, here's a template. Let's use that. And also, who would go to school to be a music manager? I wouldn't trust that person in general, just because that's a really dumb thing to do. But anyway,
step number one: don't waste your money going to school to learn how to run a lemonade stand.
Well, how to basically babysit adults. Like that's a whole. There's a And no offense, I know you're a musician, and I love musicians.
We never had a manager. I think for that reason, we were grinding for so many years that by the time the wind started to get under our wings, we were about 26, 27, and even at that, but starting at like 19, we'd have a lot of falling on our face and grinding it out years. So by the time it did start to take flight, we felt like we got this. You know what I mean? For the most part, and for better, whatever, however it works. We never became Animal Collective, but it worked for us. We hired an intern, I think, at our craziest time. We hired an assistant, and she basically did all the stuff you're saying, like booking hotel rooms and setting up interviews and creating a schedule and booking all the flights, making sure the stuff was working, returning gear that was broken to Guitar Center, and just sort of staying on top of us where the organization was just too much for us to really keep on.
Yeah, I mean, then that's exactly when it happens. Everyone I've worked with, it was at that moment when they're like, this is too much to handle. And then they started worrying about that more than writing the songs and being creative. So in that aspect, like that was something that I felt good about doing, was helping someone else achieve their creative goals and keep that in mind as I'm working with them, that it's not my decision, it's with them. And I've always felt like I worked with my clients, not for them, and they didn't work for me. It was a symbiotic relationship of like, hey, in my experience, I would say this is the way we should go. Or they would say, hey, we don't want to play this kind of venue ever again. And then it would, be a discussion, sometimes a day, sometimes 2 weeks, of having to pros and cons and be like, this isn't how it works. In this way, like, you have to compare what you want, where do you want to be, to how you're going to get there. And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy for a musician to become successful. There's millions of other people doing the same thing and wanting the same thing and willing to do things that a lot of musicians who have integrity won't do, which I think separates where people get, and it's timing. A lot of it's timing, of course.
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely you got to eat a lot of shit, or at least you're asked to eat a lot of shit, even just to the degree that, I think I've learned over the years that for a musician to make money, they have to make everybody else a lot of money. What I mean? That the musician's sort of the artist is the last one to get paid. And if you see an artist, whoever looks like they've got paid, then there's a lot of people around them that got paid a lot more than they did.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was the worst. I mean, luckily when I started, I came from the touch and go 50-50 Discord, like everything was split in a way that was fair. I remember when I had a client when I was really kind of considering management as my main gig. I was like, wait, I can actually live off this. Like let me take on another client. And I picked up a client who were great, and they're really sweet people. And I still keep in touch with one of them, but they started getting interest from Capitol, from Warner Brothers, like basically being flown out to LA to do a lot of stuff. And I'm just like, what? Like, this is major label world. Like, this is completely different than anything I know. Like, taking them shoe shopping, taking them to bars, paying for everything, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I ended up having a client get poached by another manager who was going to see them on tour when I wasn't on tour with them. And I didn't do contracts. You know, I was a manager who was just like simply like, hey, let's work together till we don't want to. That's just how it is. That changed later on, kind of because of this story. Actually, I ended up doing contracts, but it got to a point. Then I had to meet this manager who had, you know, had massive success in the '90s with hip hop artists, and he just basically said like, "Yo, you're not a manager until you get fired. Like, welcome to the club." And I was like, this is it. And then everything sort of changed, and I was like, okay, there's a good side and there's a bad side, and all the money is on the bad side, honestly. But if someone can get through and enjoy their day and enjoy what they're doing, then that's the way it should be done.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, you gotta put up with yourself at the end of the day. You know what I mean? That's the unfortunate side of it. Like, the more I learned, and as you go through it all, you know, when you're young, you don't really have the time to look at it as an artist, or even, you know, anybody working in it. You're along the ride. You're on the roller coaster. You don't think like, how did this roller coaster get built? Who's running this roller coaster? How much is it going to cost to get off this roller coaster? Like, am I going to die on this thing? You're just riding it. Right, it's fun. Right. It's all fun until it's not, and then you have lots of time to go back and dissect it forensically. Like, oh, okay, here's how this works. Here's how this happened.
Yeah.
Tell me, you know, so then through this, and then, you know, post-management world, like, we come into your own sort of creative world and back into film, or what's that sort of, you know, as all that's going on? Like, I'm curious about your creative journey.
Well, right around maybe 2018 or 19, I started to really get, realizing I wasn't working with my hands as much as I wanted to. I mean, I'd always kept a painting studio throughout since college. And then I just kind of was like, it was like, there's a Freddy Krueger meme going around where he's like sitting on a curb, you know, it's a behind the scenes thing. And he's sitting on a curb smoking a cigarette. He's like, I've been so busy chasing people in their dreams, I forgot to chase mine. And I was like, oh, that's kind of like what I've been doing. Like, I've enjoyed it and loved everyone I worked with. But, I was like, I trained for the painting, and it's like, this is sort of where my brain's going. So I moved out to Joshua Tree full time from Los Angeles and had a handful of clients. I still had an employee back in the New York office, Pam, who is amazing. And like, I wouldn't have kept managing as long as I would have if she hadn't been with me. She was basically she was like running the ship, and I'm just like in Joshua Tree, like trying to figure out what I'm doing. So I built a studio out there, a ceramic woodworking and painting studio, and started getting into furniture design and handling some clients. And then the pandemic happened, and then everything sort of determined what was next. And that was like, I'm just going to get out of this. And we survived like the first 6 months, because I had a client who worked with an insane giant producer who I don't like to talk about, but
sure,
you know, basically had no idea how much money he was spending. The team of managers had their own manager. That's how insane this was. And so I negotiated a deal with him to do 10 songs, and that kept us afloat for 8 months. And then I told Pam, I was like, if nothing comes in after this, if touring doesn't pick up, like, I'm going to, like, you can have the company if you want. She's like, I don't want it. Like,
don't give this to me. Hot potato.
Well, she ended up like starting her own company with different clients, and is killing it, which is great. But so at that point, like in late 2020, I was like, okay, I'm out. I'm pretty much out of this whole thing, and I'm going to focus on my creative stuff, be it painting. I was also helping a friend who owns a print shop in Joshua Tree, who's amazing. So I was getting my hands dirty on that aspect as well. So everything was going back into like really becoming visually oriented again for me, which was nice.
It's so cool. I mean, you've had a front seat, you know, to kind of the music industry in this, and probably one of the most recent pivotal times, you know, or most impactful times in that music industry from the 90s till now, in this last 30 years. You know, you mentioned, the pandemic shutting down live touring, like that was the last income stream that artists had, was touring. And once that went away, you know what I mean? The previous 20 years had been eroding anything resembling record sales or, royalties or anything that revolved around making money with recorded music. But then to see the live music go away, that was really, the kind of the death blow for a lot of people, or at least, financially, from that incentive. How do you reflect back on it? I mean, obviously, the hows and whys and the technology and the file sharing, there's stuff has been well documented, but I'm just curious more from a boots on the ground perspective of somebody who was there seeing it through all of these different times. Like, how do you look back on that transitions?
Everything was happening so fast. I remember when we started Monitor Records, like I said, and we were, making CDs and like having to store the vinyl. And I had a big warehouse in Fells Point, Baltimore, so I had space. But MP3s came out, and Jason, he kind of saw it as he's like, wait, we don't have to mail. Like, we can save money on postage. And I'm like, no, people are stealing music. That happened, that argument, and it was really about accepting it in your own terms. When I was like, okay, MP3s aren't bad. We can get this to a lot more people, a lot more press people, a lot more people now have email at that point. They can hear it. That's great. They're still going to record stores. There was at that point, you'd go to Newberry or Soundgarden or other music, and you put on headphones and you listen to something and you bought it. That obviously quickly changed to then you bought MP3s, you bought albums that wasn't physical, but you at least bought them. You went to Apple Music or whatever, and then that's gone. And now it's all streaming services, and no one's getting paid except the label somehow and the corporate people who run it, of course. And you have to have some crazy amount of streams to get a handful of ones at this point. So I don't really understand how people are still doing it. I mean, the thing that I love is that people who are still making music and going on the road are doing it because they love it and are passionate about it. And that's why you do it, unless you're now looking at someone like, and they'll remain nameless, but one of my last projects, I worked with a label that I love to death, and they're amazing. But I got a 4-page email of how to market on social media. It was, here's the hashtags, here's the times, here's who you need to tag in it. If you have any people that love your music, tag them. We want to go viral. So all of this, what we had done is you mail out 350 packages and you follow up, and then you write them 3 times. And then unless they tell you to fuck off, you keep talking to them until they tell you yeah, we'll do something. To now, and this happened in the live music world as well. I remember when we used to have to send posters, ahead of a tour. You sent out all your posters to the clubs and you put the dates on, and you left the space for the date. Then that switched where the promoter's like, hey, you haven't posted enough. I don't see your Instagram. You haven't mentioned the show. And it's like that you're the promoter. Your job is exactly.
The word is promoting. Promotion is your job. That is your title.
It totally
How the fuck am I promoting
me
your gig that you're going to take a cut on, and you're going to charge me for promotion?
Yeah. And as a manager, I used to get so mad at that. Especially when Gang or someone would go out, I'm like, why are you taking 15% when we're doing 80% of your job? This is ridiculous. And then you go into the world of we don't need $120 on our food rider. Just give us the $120. There's all these little battles that you fought on the road, which infuriate the promoters. But it's I watch them, and there's a lot of promoters I love, but I watch them slowly do less and less and just sit eating chips, counting money at the end of the night, being like, "Oh, it was a great show." Oh, it's
Yeah, and then I'll throw one last jab, and then we can move on. But the thing that one of the straws that really broke my back as a small independent artist who we did all this ourselves. We didn't have any kind of major funding, or as the years went on, working with Drag City and stuff, it doesn't get more bare bones in such a good way. It's in a very independent.
Yeah, those guys are great.
You eat what you kill. You know what I mean? If you if you sell it, that's your money. That's great. But with I started to get a feeling that the booking agents started to work for the clubs more than they worked for the artists. And that was really when like, oh, we really are out here on our own. You used to have a little bit of a, the booking agent was on your side trying to work for you, but then post pandemic, there was so little, it's like the clubs didn't need the artists, the artists needed the clubs. It's like, if you want to eat, you're going to play our game and we're going to promote you. We're going to be our venue interests come first from $1, all of those things. This is support the venues at all costs. The artists can go fuck themselves and kick rocks because there's plenty of artists who are hungry to play our venue, and it was just like, and the booking agents were basically, doing whatever the venue said. And it was really like, oh, this sucks now. This really, we got no one on our side out here. We're all working for the thing because they don't need you. I'm like, all right, sounds good.
Exactly. And they're using you to leverage another artist, which was the thing that always kind of pissed me off, unless someone else is being leveraged for my clients.
Sure. When it works for you, it works. But then when it comes with the other way around.
Okay, I'm playing the game. Right.
Yeah. But
anyway, there are some good agents out there. But you're right. There's a lot of really bad
but it's just
agents
hard,
who aren't thinking. Yeah.
And when the pie pie shrinks, there's less pieces of pie to go around, and there's less incentive for the good people to stick with it, because it's like, what am I doing here? This is all the pool keeps shrinking and the sharks keep getting fatter. And there's a smaller pool now. It's just it's a kiddie pool with just a bunch of Jaws megalodon sharks in there. You're just like, okay, I'm good. I used to be able to stay on the kiddie side of stuff and swim and make my little culture and my little noise over here. But now the pool shrinks and we're all you're up against the same big dogs for every fight, and you're just like, I'm not going to win this. Sorry, what were you going to say? You had a good.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, it reminds me. There was a friend of mine who was a manager, and he termed it, and I had not thought about it, but everyone I worked with who had success and had been doing this for 10 years or more went through the peanut butter and jelly tours, and that was you would sleep in the van, sleep at a fan's house, eat your rider the next day on the road, get to the show. Hopefully you sold extra t-shirts and made some money to get through it. And then if you got through those, you would pass the city you were playing the next night because you couldn't get a show in Cleveland. So you had to play Cincinnati before you went back down to West Virginia. And, this is at a time when not many people were touring, and when people were touring, you were now it seems like a nightmare. There's so much competition for nights, and
the cost, my friends just the living cost, cost of gasoline.
Yeah, I talked to the Animal Collective dudes a couple years ago, and I saw they had canceled a European tour, and I'm just like, what happened? Did someone get sick? And they're like, no, if we would have missed a show, we would have broken even at best. And I was like, you guys, that's insane to me. But that was coming right out of the pandemic, I believe. Gas prices were astronomical. Everyone apparently was raising tour bus prices. Hotels were insane. Everyone was back on the road. So the competition for pricing became maybe not a guarantee, but it was a percentage of who came in the door at this point. So what you used to be able to rely on $1,000 a night or $2,000 a night, whether you had 20 or 200 people show up, you were now getting 50% of a door. And it was also who's going out to these places when they're worried about getting COVID. So yeah, really weird times. I'm surprised so many people made it through.
Yeah. I mean, it's to be determined. I always feel like whenever I see somebody out on the road, I'm always so happy. And if I can get to a show, I'm like, yes, I want to go because this is great. I want to support and and see these people out there because it's still not I don't think it's as big as it was. It may never get back in that same kind of way. I think something was lost, and again, different time, different place. The kids coming up today won't know what it was like, but it's just how it goes. It becomes generational.
It's kind of like
nostalgia at that point.
Yeah, there weren't as many festivals around as when I was doing a lot of early management, and they definitely weren't as expensive as they are now. So rather than, and it sort of feels sort of the art fair scenario in the art world is having the same repercussions where rather than go to something 3 or 4 times a month, you save up and go 4 times a year. You'll go to Basel or you'll go to Freeze or something. Well, in music terms, you'll go to Coachella, you'll go to Bonnaroo, but you won't necessarily hit the the orange peel, or you won't go to Bowery Ballroom three times a month because, well, they're playing this festival in a couple of months, and all my bros are going, and like I'm going to like meet people, and we're going to camping, or that kind of mentality has maybe affected it more than I know, or less than I know. I don't know, but I just remember in my mind it felt when the festival circuit started happening, and all my clients wanted to get on these festivals, and all the agents.
There was a bunch of money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're guaranteed eyeballs, which was the other thing. It's like, I'm going to get in front of 80% of people who don't even know who I am. I'm like, and of course I'm like, that's great. Like, that's how you make fans. But that,
no,
exactly.
It's funny.
Unless you're playing the lunch set, nude at Coachella, you're not getting a lot of fans.
But it's interesting too. And in that regard that, the local show, the band's playing so much more, those festival stages are like, everyone's sweating you no matter who you are, you know what I mean? That band is running through that set as fast as they can with zero line check, and just going balls out as quick as they can. And that's not going to be the best set they've ever played. You know what I mean? But if you go see them on a Tuesday in your local town at a smaller venue, then you really experience whatever the best they can be. That's where you're going to see it, hopefully.
It's a really good point.
But it's just reminiscing about the small venues and the clubs and the scenes and all the culture that grows up around these venues. You have a project now about the legendary Chicago venue Lounge Acts. Tell me about your experience there and sort of what's the genesis of this project.
It started after the New York trip. I think this might have been my second or third trip as Juno 44's tour manager. And I'd still been dabbling in the film world at that point, thinking that I was going to become more involved as a filmmaker or work in the film world, whether it be props and sets or something. And so I had a friend from Baltimore who had moved to Prague to do a documentary on the Serbian war. The Kosovo situation was getting bad at that point. So it was like 99. And we couldn't find a camera over there. So he hit me up. He's like, would you go to B&H, which is in New York? It's like one of the spots that had all the new stuff, all the new gear for everything, and buy this camera and come over and shoot this with me. And I was like, yeah, it sounds amazing. So I went to B&H and bought this camera at the time, which was the top prosumer. It's called a Canon XL1. It was everyone remembers it because it's what they shot 28 days later with, except for the final scenes. Like it was, gave it this gritty feel. It's like 3-chip. It was really nice camera, affordable, not too crazy to carry around, whatever. So I went there, but they denied my visa to get into Serbia because.
I thought B&H denied your visa.
Oh no,
your Visa card. I couldn't buy it. My Visa card got denied.
They ripped it up in front of me. So I went to Prague and just and at that point I figured out the camera systematics and everything, and went there and just showed Matt how to run the camera. And I was like, good luck. I came back to the US and was getting ready to go on the tour, and I was like, I'm just going to document this tour. It was like a crazy 6-week tour, US into Taiwan, into Australia, back through, and then we were going to have 2 weeks off and go to Europe. So I bought this camera and I got to Chicago for like 4 days worth of prep for that trip, staying in Naomi's house, who was a publicist for Touch and Go, and really good friends with Jeff, the guys in the band. And so I was like crashing on her couch, and she saw the camera. She's like, you should go shoot this club. It's closing. It's getting kicked out. It's been around forever. It's like really great bands are playing. The owners are amazing. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to go down and just, get familiar with this camera that I'm going to be with the next 6 weeks or whatever. And also shoot these bands. And because at that point, I was just getting to know people in that world. And it's probably similar for you, probably similar for anyone who loves music, that when you finally meet the people that you've been listening to and only seen them on a record cover or read about them in Maximum Rock and Roll or Magna Magazine, or at that point, no one was really in spin that I was listening to. It was mostly like the real deal stuff. Like, the first time I met David Yao, I can remember being like completely freaked out at 18 years old. He's playing a club in Baltimore, and he like goes to the stall next to me to take a leak in the bathroom. And I was like, I can't believe I really made it. So moving into that world in a scenario where you're really involved in it, meeting the sound people, talking to the bands that are playing that night. I remember meeting like Rick Rizzo for the first time, and Albini and Bob and those guys, and not as a fan. I'm like, hey, I'm going to film you. They're like, cool, awesome. You know, I was like, oh, like everyone's so great here. There's really no ego involved in this. And then the club owners were really awesome as well. Sue and Julie were like the sweetest people in the world, who let me in for the final 3 nights of something they'd been working on for, 13 or 14 years, and didn't blink an eye. They're like, yeah, we film us fine. I remember Julie's like writing checks and like ordering beer and being like, she's like, yeah, whatever, film it. Like, great.
I'm gonna interrupt just real quick. I'll edit this out, but I think you're hitting the table. You're bumping at the mic's picking up everything.
Oh, sorry.
You're hitting on the table. Yeah, maybe. Just so.
Just so excited.
Just so you have audio you can use.
Yes.
Don't have the bumps on it. Yeah. So right off the bat, you come in with a camera and say, "I want to document this," and they're already closing at that point. Is this the last night of the club, or
yes? This is. I got there the last 3 nights, so I shot the 13th, 14th, and 15th of January 2000, which were they had, I think, had 2 weeks of kind of really crazy shows with Wilco, like a bunch of bands that were downplaying for them. Because this place had been the spot to play for so long. And at that point as well, other things started popping up. Hideout was started doing a much better. The Empty Bottle had just opened, was really coming into its own. And Lincoln Park was completely changing, which was the reason they're not there anymore, essentially, was the landlord decided he could get someone else in there that paid more money.
What is it now? What is
nothing.
Nothing's in there.
No, a friend of mine, another filmmaker, happened to be there on a project, and I told him what I was doing. He's like, "That's crazy!" And then I get a text with 3 videos of just an empty building. It was some kind of fancy dinner restaurant that didn't make it through the pandemic, apparently, and now it's just it's sitting empty. It says for lease on it.
Wow. And Lounge Jacks was operated from the end of the 80s through the end of the 90s. So about a 10, 11 year run. And so was
80s,
home. Sorry.
Oh, this is 87 to 2000 was the
how do you describe, sort of the impact of what Lounge Jacks was, and not just the Chicago music scene, but really, what would go on to become sort of the grassroots of alternative music around the world?
Well, it's funny thinking about that, because I'm not sure that they directly influenced the scene or anything like that. But what's really important, and I had this conversation with an agent I've worked with forever, this guy, Sam Hunt, who, I knew him through Dusted when he worked at a magazine, and then he worked at Thrill Jockey. So we kind of knew each other really early on, and then stayed in touch. And I was talking to him about this project because he used to live in Chicago. And I threw something out like, yeah, not many of these places around. He's like, wait a second. And then we started talking. We're like, wait, all of them are still around, except like the weird things like the Rat and those things. But you still have Bowery Ballroom. You still have Mercury Lounge. You still have, I'm spacing on the San Diego spot, but the Casbah. You still have, Alligator might not, Body's Pan is gone. But thinking of all the clubs that I used to be with and touring, most of them are still there.
Crocodile Cafe, right, in Seattle. That's what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
But
then there's ones that, as such an old timer, the Khyber Pass isn't there, and those places. But, all of the places that either existed at that time or still have continued to survive operate in a way that they appreciate, understand the touring aspect of what it's like, and hire staff. Like as a part owner of the Auto Bar, I was a part owner of that for years in Baltimore. We never had any turnover. Everyone who worked with us loved music, and everyone who we worked with knew that band had just gotten out of a van from probably 8 hours and hated each other. And it was like, sweet, do your thing. The sound guy would show up, and everyone was given their space and made sure everything was in the green room. And it wasn't about, we were part of 3 other venues. Like the 930 Club has now become, 3 things, and also has Merriweather, and it also is part of festivals. And so this corporate mentality started coming in probably more at the same time you maybe saw professional sports stadiums, when corporations were like, wait, there's money in the entertainment business. Let's do this thing. So in general, sorry, I'm just over speaking. I'm about to hit the table, is that seeing these two ladies run this club in such a really great way and with respect, and all the musicians having mutual respect for them. Everyone said like this was the nicest place to play, the best place to play. It was so fun that we were always treated wonderfully. There's people who came from there's an interview with Joey from Calexico. He's like, this was the place. Like these places need to keep going because we looked forward to playing this. We knew that we were going to a place that loved us and we loved them. And this was a great spot. Like it was an oasis, and you're coming out of like playing a weird place in Columbus or headed to Missoula where you don't know if anyone's going to show up. You hit these spots. And so I feel like that's the important stuff about a club that's being run professional and also with appreciation for what it's actually doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think something like a Lounge Acts, especially at that time from the 80s through to the end of the 90s. I mean, it was they're supporting not just the Chicago scene, Touch and Go, Thrill Jockey, and everything that was coming through that, but also just the ride from college radio to alternative radio, which and the explosion of this sort of underground music that all of those bands, I imagine, at one time or another passed through club like Lounge Acts and were sort of shown the support at a time when no one when it was not as supportive necessarily environment. And like you say, every night by night, you never know what you're going to get as a band on the rise or grinding it out, but something like a Lounge Act strikes me as one of those sort of things of like, we know we're going to have a good show. And even if it's a terrible show, we know we're not going to be chased out of there with a broom. We're going to get paid. We're going to eat. We're going to get a drink and send on our way,
Yeah.
So many of those things are so important, for touring bands.
One of the questions I asked Julia back then, was just like, have you ever not paid a band? And she's like, no, we've like every band is left here with at least enough money to get to the next town. Like that was a huge part of like, we had to make sure of that. So, yeah, I mean, being out of the game for so long, I don't know how many clubs they're still around. Living in New Mexico, I think the last time I was in Albuquerque on tour was a place called maybe the Launchpad.
Yeah.
Or is that
they were there as of 3 years ago when we played to 5 people there.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Like I just don't go down there, and there's nothing in Santa Fe. There's a place called Meow Wolf, but it's
a different kind of experience.
I'm like, I don't get this.
But I think it's interesting though too. I mean, even just talking about the rise of sort of corporate culture, and what I mean, the idea of two friends opening a bar, having live music on there. It's not uncommon, but I think to have it be as beloved and as legendary as something like Lounge Acts, and it's, I just think that Chicago music scene, specifically around that time and being near Wax Tracks and just sort of, there's Chicago was really the heart and soul of so much of that American underground, would become alternative. And then even the industrial sort of scene as well. I mean, there was a huge sort of scene of people and just really good music that came out of there through the Touch and Go label, through Thrill Jockey, and then even up through, Smashing Pumpkins and Wilco and all, Americana and everything else that went through there. It was a very fertile creative time. And I would have to imagine that venues like Lounge Acts play a big role in that, because bands need places to play. And that's where you build up a community. And that's where you get the will to write another song, if you're just doing this in your bedroom to nobody, it's like, but if you can get 20 people in a small club and everyone's clapping and you're drinking beers all night, you walk out that night thinking, I can take on the world. I can do this. I got another record in me, but you need those venues. Without those, you're really just pissing in the wind.
Totally. Yeah. It's funny, talking about the corporate stuff. There's a really great interview I do in the film with Dan, the doorman, who'd been there since day one. So he'd been there for 12 years, and he came from another club that was influential in that scene prior called Cubby Bear, which might've been before your time. I remember it a little bit when I was coming up, but it closed, I guess a couple of years before Lounge Acts. But Dan's explaining the neighborhood, and he says like, well, Wax Tracks was across the street, and there's this really great bookstore here, and there's a really awesome little diner that was all neighborhood people. But now all these other things are coming in. There's some new coffee shop down the street called Starbucks. And looking at that now, I was like, whoa, like Starbucks was no one knew whether it was going to succeed. He thought it was just like a dude owning a coffee shop called Starbucks, let alone this giant thing. And, you know, that's goes to show like a lot of those places move into the pioneer aspect of an artist, of an art community, of creative community, is you go to the places that are cheap, you start things. And then when all the people with money being like, oh, wow, a lot of people are going to this part of town now, or this gallery is successful, or like this restaurant that used to be nothing is now like making a lot of money. They start buying the real estate, and it's a typical story.
Yeah. I mean, and something like, you know, the film High Fidelity, you know, based on a British or Scottish, you know, sort of book, but it was sort of, you know, exported into a Chicago scene where Wax Trax was the cool record store of the time. Mm-hmm. And then Lounge Acts was featured in there as, you know, sort of this, it was the time of that earnestness in retail, I guess is the best way to put it. You know, when you'd go to a bookstore, or a record store, or a video store, and the people that work there took it very seriously, almost to the point of annoyance or, you know, but that was a culture. That was how that's how information got passed down. I mean, it was before the internet, obviously. And it was, there was a commitment to a culture, totally. and through these records, these slabs of vinyl, that they mattered, and the bands that created them mattered, and venues that supported those bands mattered, and you had to go out, you had to be there to see it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you there was 3 record clerks at Soundgarden in Baltimore that if they told me to listen to something, it was like, you grab it, you never listen to it. And I don't know how much that happens anymore, to be honest. I don't really know.
Well, it's like everything else that's shifted online. You know what I mean? The influencer kind of, you know, we're even beyond, we've blown past the web 2.0 stuff of the blogs and the, you know, sort of the pitchforks of it all, to now it's individual, you know, sort of tastemakery things. And who you got to find, you can see a cool TikTok video of somebody dancing, you know, and shaking their ass. You're like, okay, now I need to go stream that song. And then that gets a million hits, and somehow someone makes money. By the end of this all, everyone's wasted their time and run around and done a million dances. And then you might sell a ticket to Coachella or something, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because being out of the music world at this point for 5 years, I can now see how little some people care about it. And, you know, I think that falls into anything anyone's passionate about or involved in. You know, I don't really care about woodworking tools. I don't pick up the trade magazines, and I don't like go shopping at Home Depot to find out what's the new jointer. And now out of the music business, like I really don't listen to anything new, unless someone is emphatic, like you need to hear this, or you would love this or something. And that's usually coming through old friends who are musicians. But you know, I see these people who want to go see Sabrina, and now Sabrina's playing Coachella. And then there's this big thing where this is the first Coachella coming up where all 3 headliners for all the days are pop stars. And so, you know, these sort of curmudgeonly critics are like, oh, Coachella's finally done. It's like, hasn't it been done for a while?
Worst festival lineup so far. You can always, you know, there's always next year. It can always get worse. I think it jumped the shark a long time ago. But again, it's also, that's the privilege of age. You know what I mean? We've been around long enough, and we didn't fucking OD in the 90s or the 2000s. Yeah. And you know what I mean? You live long enough, and you get to not give a shit. You get to not care. I think it's, you know, it's more for that, you know, when you're young and you are hungry and you're grinding and you're, you know what I mean? When you're invested in your culture and your community, and you're making new art that matters and talking to a generation who needs to hear what's going on, you know, then that's where, you know, you have to give a shit. But for us at this, you know, north of 30, that's it. We're done. Our time's done. We had our time at, you know, we had our hand on the wheel, and we did with it what we did. And now it's time to give that over to someone else. It's not our bus to drive anymore.
Totally. And I love that people are still doing it. Like nothing but respect for anyone out there grinding, who's in the bus, in the van, you know, or in their car, like with the trunk full of gear, like still going out there and doing stuff. And
absolutely.
And at the same time, you have this Oasis thing that just happened, and, you know, I couldn't get away from it. I'm not an Oasis hater. I'm not a fan. And I think I commented something and someone like gave me grief, like, oh, bah humbug, you're like an old dude. I was like, no, I don't. I love that people are having these feelings for them still. I just don't need to hear about it in every fucking post that you send. Like, I now know what Noam Gallagher and Liam Gallagher look like. I know that they're, you know, I know all these things about them. And they're just like, I didn't ask for this. But, you know,
Yeah.
I'm glad you loved them. And I'm glad you went to all 7,000 shows that you could attend and got a bucket hat.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was there. It's so funny though, too. I just feel like it's one of those things where you get that many people into any kind of like sports stadium, you know, and then you're going to hear about it and you're going to get haters and you're going to get, you know, the mega fans. It becomes a law of numbers at some point.
Totally. And their music is that, you know, it's like this triumphant, like you shout with it, you sing along.
For 5 songs you can do that too. And then,
right.
I was there. It was a 2-hour show and an hour and a half of it was pretty boring. And then there was a half hour but it was the last half hour. This is what I think was my critique. They should not have put all the hits at the end of the encore. They even opened the encore with a couple snoozers. I'm like, you guys, come on.
No one's posting about the boring parts.
Put a couple of those up front. I mean, but again, they're a band that, you know what I mean, came out of the gate swinging. Those first 2 records were full of hits, you know, for someone of my age. And then they put out another 5 records that I've never listened to.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, again, like anybody, and we know enough, you know, bands that, you know, you're around long enough, you know, you gotta, that set starts to get pretty saggy towards the middle.
Totally.
You know what I mean? You open up with a couple bangers and then you're going to play the 3 middle hits that you had off those records that you love. And then you're going to finish strong. But for me, the Oasis, it's like, wow, there's plenty of time to go wait in line to go to the bathroom, plenty of time to wait in line to go get a churro and a pretzel and a lemonade. You know, I had plenty of time to walk around the stadium and enjoy the sights and the walk back to my nosebleeds. But getting back to Lounge Acts, what's next? Where do you go from here? And what do you want people to know? What's the takeaway, or what's the action item for Lounge Acts as the doc?
I want to go finish some follow-up interviews. Sue and Julia still live in Chicago. Their lives have changed pretty dramatically. Sue's now married to Jeff Tweedy, and both of their sons, Sam and Spencer, who are in the documentary at 2 weeks old and 3 years old, are now 28 and 25, and are his backing band. So they're like touring, and I think he just released a new record. And so I see Sue, you know, posting about the family doing this stuff. So it's really sweet. And then Julia and her husband, Patrick, who used to own Carrot Top Records, he worked at Wax Trax for years. I think that's actually how they met. And then he started Carrot Top Records, which when I had the Monitor Records with Jason, we used to do some business with them. And Patrick was always awesome, but I never knew they were married. And then, you know, when I finally got in touch 25 years and 7 days later, which was pretty funny because they actually thought they owed me money. They thought they hired me to make this documentary.
Oh, and no.
I'm like, no, you didn't hire me. They're like, oh my God, we thought you were calling us because you wanted to hire. Exactly. I was like, no. And so they were like, we're cracking up about that. But, I just want to get this thing done and sort of give it. I want people who not only care about all the bands, but also the people who want to know like how the neighborhood changed, what gentrification is like, without being like a social justice doc by any means. You know, I'm not going that deep. I'm basically going like with a less blank film in mind, where it's just, I'm there, I got a camera, I'm talking to people. This is the snapshot of this moment. It's the last 3 nights of this club. Here's how everyone's feeling. Boom, 25 years later, where are you? What's going on? What happened? How are you feeling? All this sort of stuff. And a lot of that's to be determined. You know, I don't know how they're feeling about things. I don't know. Maybe they fought another 5 years to try to get this club open, but it didn't work.
And tell me about the bands who you shot, who's in the doc, what live sets do you have?
Another amazing thing for the past year is tracking down people 25 years later. Thinking, I honestly thought Jim O'Rourke was going to be the hardest to get a hold of because, you know, he's moved to Japan and he's sort of become more of a composer and ambient. It was like the first dude to write back. He's like, oh yeah, I know exactly what song you want. And so he's like stoked. So it was Jim, Shellac, Will Oldham, Bonnie Prince Billy at that point, Traders, which were pretty awesome short-lived Chicago hardcore, well, more punk band. They're just definitely the most energetic band of the whole film, which is really funny. The Dishes, Thinking Fellers Union, Local 22, Dianoga Cocktails, 11th Dream Day. I believe there's 11. I might be forgetting one. Let me look at my board. There's a couple that we didn't get, unfortunately, because it was just me running everything. And so if the camera went down or I ran out of tape, I'd have to run to the back of the green room and get a tape and the band would be done, which was a drag because like Moto was one of them and they were really fun. But yeah, I'm looking at, I think I named all the bands. And the funny thing is, like, I shot maybe like 20 hours of this and maybe 4 of that is all bands. And I just really thought we were going to have maybe 30 minutes. It was going to be hard to get 30 minutes. And my editor, this really amazing editor named Jeremy Edwards, who lives in New Orleans, who did Sicario. I met him through a mutual friend who he worked with on motion picture editing. But then he does a show called Rami that I think is still around, but the guy's a really successful comedian now. And he's great. And he's sort of a music head. So he's like, yeah, I'd love to do this project. And so he's sent me a string out, which is basically when you put the narrative together, like how the story will play out, like the timeline and like what anyone's talking about. And we've had like an hour and 10 minutes. And it's like, this is too much. This is way too much. Like, so the editing process will be fun because it's really the editing of anything. And I'm sure you've done it a million times when you're trying to figure out what record to go on and like getting a song right. And, that's when you're really finding out what matters. So I'm kind of in the middle of that. It's almost like 2 films. I have the 2000 footage and then I'm going to follow up with 2025 stuff and figure out how they fit together. So it'll be interesting. Yeah. And then I'm working on
the
other
story is
projects.
still in development. You don't really have the final button on it. The story's not finished yet, which is great. It's fun. This is a work in progress sort of check-in, which is really fun to see. And are you looking for backers? Are you doing some kind of crowdsourcing?
We're starting fundraising, crowdsourcing next week. I believe it's been pushed back and forth because we've been trying. I've never done this before, so I have people I'm working with who are consultants on this.
I'm sure we'll have a link in the bio when this goes out live. Everybody can click on the link to support the film, and I'm sure there'll be all kinds of cool incentives to get for that. And then what about on social media? Is there a channel you want people to follow, or what's the best way to keep up with the update of the film or with you and as it develops?
For sure. The best thing is Instagram is at loungeaxdoc, and that's loungeaxdoc. Mm-hmm. And then also the website is www.loungeaxdoc.com.
Awesome. And you sent me some footage of Lungfish. Where was this? What was this in relationship to? I'm curious. Just what that. Yeah. So it looks beautiful. It looks great.
Thank you. There's a lot of stuff that I found in the past year that I'm now diving back into. One of them being I had an acquaintance at the time who owned a roll-up Bolex 16 millimeter, and he lived in New York. And I was like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you go shoot this band, Lungfish? And he, like a pop punk dude, I guess at that point, like he'd never seen them, which turned out to be the best person in the world to shoot that footage. Because at that point, that was 1998. Dan was still a practicing legendary tattoo artist, so he's covered. And tattoos weren't ubiquitous back then. Yeah. You saw this guy with a Fidel Castro beard, covered in tattoos, singing in all black with people behind them who had their eyes closed. It was definitely not a thing that was happening often at that scene. So Ed, the camera guy, was, what the hell is this? So he sent me the footage. I got it back. And then I just digitized it about 6 months ago and then finally edited it together and found an old bootleg from a show in Philly the year after that footage was taken. And spent some time visually trying to sync it. And then that just turned into being a nightmare. So I just made it more about the visuals of the footage. Cause the film at that point looks really great. There's a lot of light leaks. And if you weren't underneath the spotlight, you probably weren't going to get any shots. Like a lot of that stuff was so dark.
It looks so cool though. I mean, I love it. So it's just another addendum to sort of as your documentary, as you're going through the archives and pulling stuff out, you have things like this.
Yeah. I still have probably 40 hours of footage from that June of 44 tour. I have a ton of stuff from that time period, but also now it's gotten me back into the film world. And I just produced a video for a British artist in LA last week, and I'm working on some other stuff coming up in the next few months. So it's been great. It's been fun to sort of get back into the mindset of the whole, film is a multi-headed monster. It's much, much different than painting, where you're alone and crying in the corner most of the time.
Yeah. You really got to be a general leading an army into war to sort of get through any sort of film process and have some degree of money and with some extra money on the side doesn't hurt either to get all that work done.
And it's the worst industry right now for finding money. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wish you all the best, and I can't wait to see the final doc. And you have to come back once it's ready to go, and you're out in front of the big premiere. And we can do a Q&A live on stage.
I love your optimism.
Oh, it'll happen. It'll happen. It's every journey begins with these steps, right? This is where it's at. I mean, we've all seen so many of these things go. I'm still looking forward to seeing the Bill Bartell documentary that Dave Markey has done. I don't know if you've heard about that. Like The Secret Life of Bill Bartell. He was in a band. He was an LA local. He was in a band called White Flag, and he's sort of this subversive element amongst the 80s and 90s sort of LA underground, where he sort of turned on everybody to this David Cassidy sort of 70s pop music in a way that he legitimized its coolness factor, but he also may have been a police officer in the Inland Empire at the same time.
Amazing.
But he never told anybody about it, but he was at every show, and he's best friends with Thurston and Kim and the McDonald brothers, and was, just agitator behind the scenes of all things, cool. And there's
that's
great
amazing.
Brian Cahew and Dave Markey did. It made its rounds of all the festivals and whatnot. And again, yeah, I'm just saying, music, the more niche and the more ingrained a music doc can get, I think the better. I mean, I think you're right on the money with, Lounge Acts doc. I think you got to get as Chicago as you can with it. Just no ketchup allowed on any hot dogs.
Exactly. Mr. Beef for nothing.
There was no ketchup used in the making of this documentary. 100% pure Chicago. Brian, awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great catching up and chatting with you about the documentary Last Night at Lounge-Lax. Lounge-Lax? How about Lounge-Ax? Oh my God. I'm getting the pig Latin going. Last Night at Lounge-Ax, a documentary film, 100% pure Chicago documentary. The Kickstarter is live. It is happening. You can find the link to it on livingmountain.com. That's LVNGMNTN.com. You can also find more about the documentary on Instagram. The Instagram handle is LoungeAxDoc. And Brian's production art studio, Living Mountain, is also on the Instagram. That's LVNGMNTN. Am I saying it right? Living Mountain? Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? Living Mountain Productions. You can find the link to the Kickstarter there and follow Brian and his journey and his art and everything he's doing there. What does it say here on the Kickstarter? Last Night at Lounge-Ax, a documentary film. Be immersed in the final 3 days of one of Chicago's most beloved indie venues, capturing a pre-digital era of live music and community. Super cool. Looks like art by Johnny Herndon, past podcast guest here. Last Night at Lounge-Ax. Very, very cool. What do we got here? Who are the bands? He didn't even go through all of them on the thing. I don't think we got Thinking Fellers Union, Local 282, King Kong, Shellac, Traders, Millie's Orchid Show, The Dishes, Jim O'Rourke, 11th Dream Day, Bonnie Prince Billy, Dianoga, The Cocktails, Bride of No-No. I mean, come on. What a time and place, that's never been seen before. That is, been sitting in a box ready to get unearthed and saturate your eyeballs. So if this is your kind of thing, this is my kind of thing. Go to livingmountain.com to get a link to the Kickstarter where you can support cool music, cool art, cool films, and cool people doing good stuff. So thank you, everybody. I will see you back on Monday when I'll be joined by Aaron Farley to discuss Brian DeRan and the doc, the Kickstarter. And I think we're also going to be talking about the 1932 film Freaks by Todd Browning as part of our Halloween movie month. I'm really forcing Aaron just to turn a halftime into a half movie podcast. If this is your kind of thing, write me, hyphenatehalftime@gmail.com. Find me on the Instagram @RandySRandall. And if you think I should just do a whole separate movie show, right? A whole separate movie podcast, I may need to do one of those. I mean, is that what the world needs more of? Is not just podcasts about music and creative things, but film review, film commentary, film criticism, insight, analysis, curation. I don't know. Sounds kind of fun. I'm into it. If you're into this kind of thing, write me. Let me know. And if you got projects that you're working on, music, photos, art, painting, knitting, sculpture, weaving, I mean, you know, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Send me what you got. hyphenatehalftime@gmail.com, and we'll throw it up here on the show and share with the community writ large. All right, everybody, go out and be the change you want to see in the world. Peace.
And also, who would go to school to be a music manager? You know, I wouldn't trust that person in general just because that's a really dumb thing to do.